If you're a business owner that's in the service industry and you're charging your clients based on the services you render, I have something for you. I want to teach you about how to price your service so that people would feel stupid saying no. So my name is Edward Collins and I just want to welcome you back to another episode. Today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about my own personal pricing journey. You see, I started my first financial planning practice back in '98 and I want to talk with you about three things. One, how I've gone from $1,500 per client to over $100,000 per client. Two, I want to share with you the pricing formula that I actually use today. And three, I want to share with you how you can actually increase your price by taking a look at my pricing formula and implementing it within your own practice. So if you've been following me at all, you know that my journey in business as an adult started back in 1998. That's when I opened my first financial planning practice. And back then, I fell victim to what most service providers fall victim to. Most of us are trained to essentially just trade our time for the dollars based on the services that we're rendering during the time that we're trading. So for instance, if I was engaging with a financial planning client, I would charge them based on the hours it would take me to generate that financial plan. In the beginning, I was charging a pretty low amount. I was just getting started. I didn't know that much about rendering financial planning services. So I was charging somewhere in the neighborhood of about $100 an hour at the beginning. Now again, I recognize that $100 an hour is a lot compared to a lot of different businesses, but for financial services professionals, that actually ends up being on the lower end of the spectrum. But over the years, I started to recognize that I had pretty much less time available to render services to clients because my calendar was fully booked. And I realized that I was capping out on the amount of money I could make because again, like you, I only have 24 hours in a day and 7 days in a week. So if I was charging based on the hours and based on whatever hourly rate I was charging, I would be limited with regard to my income. So I started to think, okay, well, let me start to increase what my hourly rates were. And over time, I did that. But again, I got to a point where I was charging a pretty hefty amount, anywhere from $1,500 per client environment, because I was charging $100 an hour and it would take me anywhere from 10 to 20 hours, on average 15 hours to generate a financial plan. So most clients were paying $1,500 for a financial plan for me. But I got to a point where I was charging about $500 an hour. And again, that's 5 times the amount I was charging when I got it started, but it still wasn't an environment where I was satisfied because I was rendering so much value to the clients that I was helping. And I actually heard this quote by Warren Buffett, which I'll share with you later, but it got me going down the mindset of charging differently. And I did. I started charging in a way that was more oriented based on the conversations I was having with clients around the value I was creating for them. If I was able to create a specific outcome or assist them in their journey toward that outcome, what would the value be for them if that outcome was achieved? And that conversation got us to focus more on the value end of the spectrum, and that's where I started to charge. I started to charge based on the value that I was creating for the client, not the amount of time it would take me to create that outcome. And that journey has now led me to a point where I'm now charging based on that value, and most clients right now, if you're engaging my services to do done-for-you financial planning and implementation, that would cost a client somewhere in the neighborhood of about $100,000 to engage me a year. That entire experience didn't happen overnight. It happened over the course of 20 plus years, but it's a journey that you can shortcut if you just know the right formula. A number of years ago, I came across a quote by Warren Buffett, and it goes like this: "Price is what you pay, value is what you get." When I heard this quote, it actually started my mind going. For the longest time, I was charging based on the hours I was giving to a client. But in reality, the hours was not what they were getting. What they were getting was an outcome based on my competence, my ability to actually render a particular series of services to them to get them to a point where they wanted to be within their personal lives and within their businesses. And that value concept, even though I knew what value was, or at least I had some understanding of what value was, I never really understood how value played a role in pricing until I heard that quote, because it started my mind thinking, and that pivoted me to get into this concept of having different types of discussions with clients. And those discussions were really centered on what was the outcome that they were looking for. I've heard a lot of people talk about sell the vacation, not the plane ticket. You're not selling the experience going through TSA. You're not selling the experience of sitting in first class. What you're doing is you're selling the fact that they're on the beaches of Maui or on a yacht somewhere in the Mediterranean. That's the concept of selling the outcome. And the outcome is where the value value is perceived in the mind of the client, the mind of the individual you're rendering the service for. And as I was learning this and started to incorporate it, basically being a guinea pig of myself, having these conversations with clients specifically about outcome and value, and then started to seed in their minds the cost of my services being tied more to the value creation rather than any amount of time expended. Like, for instance, I can give you one example. I can remember having a conversation with this client, and we were talking about his specific business and what he was looking to accomplish. I remember that he was having some significant pains from the prior year's tax return bill. I remember that he was frustrated with regard to not really being able to grow his business, not being able to scale it. And we started talking about what things would look like if things were different, meaning what value would he be receiving if we were to clean up the books, making sure that his financial housekeeping was well in order. And we got to a point where he essentially said that the value that he would receive from this would be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $75,000. So we anchored his mindset on that price point. Based on that, we came up with a price to charge this particular client. I seem to remember saying something along the lines, for the services that I would render in this regard, I typically charge $15,000. I can remember having that quick conversation with him, and his immediate response to me was, wow, that seems like a very large number. How long is it going to take you to get this done? And I can remember my initial response was going to be $15,000 and divide by about 20, because I thought that it would take me about 20 hours to do the work that he needed to be done. And I stopped myself. I said, well, does it really matter how long it takes? In fact, if I was able to do it in less time, would you pay me more? If I'm charging you by the hour, you'd want it to be done as quickly as possible, right? And he said, yes, obviously. Like, you wouldn't want me to take 100 hours if I'm charging you by the hour. The amount of time it takes is a factor in the value received by the client. So if I'm incented to actually do it in less time, because that would be more valuable to you, then my compensation shouldn't be tied to the time it takes me to get it done. My compensation should be tied to the value that I create for you. So if I can get it done in less time, that creates more value for you. And that's where I started to really hone in on this calculus that I call the perfect pricing formula. This perfect pricing formula starts by anchoring at the value matrix. So you're starting with value as the initial price point. But then you have to realize that when you're offering or presenting an offer to a client, there is some uncertainty whether or not the outcome is actually going to be achieved. If I'm selling the vacation, not the transportation to the vacation, there potentially could be some uncertainty. Maybe the flight gets canceled or delayed, or my luggage gets lost. There could potentially be some level of uncertainty there. So if you're starting with value, you always have to discount down from value based on whatever the potential uncertainty is or the risk is in not achieving a particular outcome. So the perfect pricing formula is essentially value minus uncertainty. And that's where you would set your price. Having an understanding of this formula gives you an amazing ability to control your price going forward. And that's simply by changing two separate dials. So the two dials right now within the pricing formula are totally within your control. Even though the concept of value is in the mind of the recipient of the value, you have the ability to influence that perception. How do you influence the perception? Well, you can increase the value by either increasing the bundle of services that are being rendered, meaning you're just increasing the number of things that are being done, particularly for that particular client, under that same price, if you will. Or you could actually increase the impact of the thing that you do. And that's a skill set issue. Like, if you're able to improve your competence to render a better end result for a client, or an end result in even less time, that value component can go up. On the uncertainty dial, you can dial the uncertainty down by a few different metrics. One, you can create some sort of guarantee, meaning you're going to guarantee a specific outcome for that particular client. Or again, by increasing your competence, you can increase the probability of the outcome. You're going to say, I've perfected the skill not just once or twice, but now over 100 different clients or 1,000 different clients. I know it works. So therefore, my rendering the service, I'm essentially creating a probability that is near 100% probability that the outcome will be achieved. So if you dial up value and dial down uncertainty, your prices can go up, both of which you have an ability to control. So let's recap for a moment. I started off charging around $1,500 per client, and currently today I'm charging about $100,000 per client for done-for-you services. business. So if I'm working one-on-one with a client, engaging and developing the full financial plan for that client, helping them get from A to Z and then back to A and then back to Z with multiple businesses, they basically pay for the value that I create for them. But how did I come up with that? How did I transition from going from $1,500 per client to $100,000 per client? Because I really started to recognize that pricing should not be based on me trading time for dollars. It should be based on the value creation that I am able to provide for the clients that I serve. And I developed that perfect pricing formula, starting with value, discounting for uncertainty. And since I have the capability of controlling those two dials, I've worked over the past number of years trying to figure out how I can dial up the value that I'm able to provide for the client while at the same time dialing down the uncertainty. And ultimately, that's led to me being where I am today, and it's led me to basically be able to live a financially free life with my family, because it's all based on value creation. Because after all, my definition of success is basically if you create enough value in the minds of others and in the lives of others, money will follow. And financial freedom is the best freedom to find because it leads to all other freedoms in life. I hope this has been valuable to you, and if it has, I want you to definitely click that, click that subscribe button, because the value that's about to come in the weeks and months ahead, you're not gonna wanna miss. I can't wait to share it with you on the next episode. Bye for now.